Yo, what up, CUC fam? Feeling good coming back at you with velocity-based training. So, what is VBT? VBT is a form of auto-regulation that allows us to use bar velocity to more accurately prescribe training loads for a certain training zone. So, think strength, power, strength endurance, hypertrophy, the like, right? So, um, why is this so important? Well, mainly athlete preparedness, right? That athlete is going to come in on any given day, either ready to go or not so ready to go, right? And this might be because of extra physical or mental fatigue that they've developed from poor nutrition, poor hydration, poor sleep, um, relationship issues, too much school, all sorts of things that happen in our life, right? And so there's this cumulative effect, and it ultimately adds a level of fatigue, to the athlete. So we want to account for this because this can alter on a day-to-day basis their performance as much as 18%. So how we go about kind of starting this whole thing off is we build a load velocity profile. So the athlete can move the bar at a certain speed or a certain velocity, for that percentage of their 1 rep max, right? And so they're going to do this at varying loads, and we'll develop that profile. So based off of those different mean concentric velocities, we'll compare that daily value to those mean concentric velocities for that particular training effect, and we will be able to decide, do we need to move the weight up because we moved the bar faster than we needed to? Do we need to keep the weight the same because it matched that velocity zone that we wanted to be in? Or do we actually want to take the weight down because on that particular day, I'm just not moving the bar fast enough for that zone? So how do we kind of combat fatigue even more from there other than just picking the right weight? Well, we use velocity stops. So when we're hitting those weights for those velocity zones, we're getting this slow reduction in velocity from rep to rep as we accumulate fatigue. And once we've dropped a certain percentage under that, under the speed that we want or the velocity that we want for that velocity zone, then we'll cut the set. So if we get, anywhere from it could be a 10 to 30% reduction or, of velocity for that particular zone, then we can go ahead and we can stop the set, which will ultimately probably be more accurate than using things like reps in reserve, and definitely going to save us a lot of reps in comparison to just going to failure or breakdown in technique. So reasoning for VBT, well, like we said, load prescription using bar velocity. It's huge, it's accurate, it fits the day, right? It matches that athlete's readiness for that particular day. And it's more accurate than other forms of auto-regulation, and even still, it doesn't have the same mounting effect as far as fatigue goes as other forms of auto-regulation. So other forms of auto-regulation might use a rep out. So I'm gonna rep out, and if I get a certain amount of reps past the desired reps for that weight, then I know I can move the weight up. If it matches, I'll stay the same. If I don't get my reps for the day, I'll move it down. And what that does is that builds in a higher level fatigue, especially over time. So we're trying to kind of combat that. It puts a big emphasis on contraction intent. So I'm not just moving the bar mindlessly, or I'm not just trying to get out from underneath it, but I'm really driving, right? I'm attempting to move this bar as fast as I can on every single rep, the same as I would in a sporting event when I'm trying to jump as high as I possibly can, or sprint as hard as I can, right? That intent can be developed in the gym, and it doesn't have to be just a field or court experience. So we get that contraction intent, we get that building of motivation for our athletes, and that really is huge. The reduction in volume, again, using those velocity stops can be big, and then using those appropriate intensities. Superior strength and power gains. We'll show you in this study that was done that it's proven to build strength and power better than percentage-based training plans based off your 1RM. So these are some increases that we're seeing in 6 weeks of training. I must say of elite, not elite, but established lifters, right? Male lifters. And so in the back squat, they were actually able to increase their max or their 1RM by 1% over that percent-based training group. In the bench press, they were able to get a 4% increase over that percentage-based training using velocity-based training. The strict press was dead even, and then in the deadlift, there was a 3% increase in that maximum, more than the percent-based training group had. And if that doesn't get your attention, then it was done with less, right? There was actually a reduction in volume with better outcomes in weight. So as you can see in the back squat, because we have those velocity stops, there was a 8.8% reduction in volume for the back squat, 5.5% for the bench press, nearly 6% for the strict press. The deadlift wasn't as impressive, with only a 1.36% deduction in volume compared to percent-based training. But like we said in the past, in the last slide, there was actually an increase of 3% in the deadlift. So we are definitely getting stronger with less volume. So total mean volume was almost 6% less with that VBT group. Now, how would I use velocity-based training? The thing with velocity-based training is it is highly dependent on technology, and sometimes that technology, especially for more accurate forms of technology, can be a little pricey. So, but in a perfect world, if my gym could get it, or if I could get it for my athletes, I love it, because it really does take in where is that athlete on that particular day. I work at a school, and these kids are dealing with all sorts of stuff. They're playing sports year round. Some of them are playing multiple sports. They got school, obviously, and definitely a lot of relationships going on, friends and significant others, and have family. And I think we all know that can bring about a lot of stress sometimes. So it does that using that auto regulation. And so I love it, right? And I think the other thing that I really love about it is the motivation and intent. When we're training athletes, we're not just trying to teach them to go hard on the field. And I think some athletes, especially, at my level, on the varsity level, we haven't necessarily developed that yet. So some velocity-based training can begin to build that, even in the off season. So that intent, that drive, that tenacity, that desire to get after it, was developed using the bar, and now we're using it on the field or on the court or on the track or whatever it might be. So I really like it for that. How do I currently use VBT? Well, from an analytical, point of view, a scientific level, using, trying to extract all these numbers and data, I don't use it. I can't afford it. My school can't afford it, not yet anyways. So we don't, but I do use the idea of it, right? So using that force velocity curve, we try to train in all those different zones, right? So we use our plyometrics, we do our speed training, we do our speed strength, our strength speed, our power development, and all this is happening because we're doing different lifts to address those, from plyometrics to the Olympic lifts to our big compound lifts that are moving a little bit slower but at heavier weights. We're getting that done, right? And also the intent, right? Doing things to encourage our athletes to drive the weight, not being that that passive strength coach, but really driving home the idea of attack. And that's how I probably use it best, knowing that I don't have that technology. So come back again for more, but that is velocity-based training.